This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, back for another review. As I continue my run through of films based on real life serial killers, and this is kind of a brand new film. This came out this year. It premiered at Toronto International Film Festival in September. Then October 19th, select theaters, and then Netflix, October 26th. So it's not even 2 months old. And it's one I've wanted to see because this is another case that I've always been interested in. These kinds of cases I do like to read about. The Angels of Death, serial killers, which I'll get to. But of all those Angels of Death, I think this is the one I know about the most. Maybe next to Britain's Harold Shipman. I guess you could say H.H. Holmes is kind of considered one as well. The nurse/doctor serial killers. Jack Kevorkian is not one. He was always called Dr. Death. But that is Charles Cullen, and the film is The Good Nurse. This is one I've wanted to see ever since it came out in October. But for whatever reason, I just did all those other ones first. It is kind of lengthy. It's over 2 hours. It's like 2 hours and 3 minutes. When I saw the trailer on Netflix, I was like, is this focusing on Cullen? Or is this more of Jessica Chastain's character? Based on real-life nurse Amy Lawford, who was a friend of Cullen's, a co-worker, that actually helped investigators build their case against him and finally arrest him. I was like, is it focusing more on her? Is it just a small window in Cullen's life? Or is it an actual Cullen film? And I actually didn't even really know until like partway through it that, yeah, this takes place during the final hospital that Cullen worked at, which was the Somerset Medical Center in Somerset, New Jersey, in the last year of his freedom, from 2002 to 2003. It's not really based on his whole life or his whole killing spree, which that would be a long film. You know, confessed to 40 murders, convicted of 29, but some think that his death toll could be upwards of 400, which is insane. You know, even Harold Shipman is believed for 250. But so no, it's just that small window, mainly focusing on the Amy character. So in a way, it's kind of like sort of the Charles Cullen version of Extremely Wicked. You know how Extremely Wicked is based on a book by Liz Klepfer. This is based on a book, but the book's a little different because with Extremely Wicked, where the book is told all through Liz's eyes, it's her memoir. The book is not a memoir; it's about Charles Cullen, and the character of Amy doesn't come in until like the third act of the book. But I believe it was the writer of the film, Christy Wilson Cairns, she thought the whole aspect of the friendship between Amy and Charles, and you know her heart condition, and then her having to be the one to help take him down, thought that was the most compelling and emotional part of the story, and that became the main focus of the film. So, but it is it is kind of played out like Extremely Wicked. You never see Charles Cullen actually killing any of his victims. It's mostly implied, or you could kind of you can see the evidence there, but you never actually see him do it. It even plays out like maybe he's innocent in some way, and then it just leads up until his arrest at the very end. So it does kind of play out like Extremely Wicked. So I can see people probably not liking this because you never see him kill anybody. Same with Extremely Wicked. A lot of people hated that movie because it didn't show any murders, despite how accurate it is. But a difference between this and Extremely Wicked is that is very fact based, even to the point of recreating a lot of stuff that's in public record. This isn't so much about recreating the book or anything like that. A lot of it is dramatized. There is a lot of a fictionalization, or I wouldn't even call it fictionalization, more representation. The names of the hospitals have been changed, I'm guessing for legal reasons, but we do see 3 patient deaths in the film. Now, supposedly he killed at least 13 at Somerset. We see 3 of them. There are 4 of them. We see 4 of them. There was the first one, the guy. We see 3 of them. Excuse me. So we see 3, but we see law enforcement coming in after the first one, when in reality the two detectives were not brought in until after his final victim. So in real life, after his final victim, when law enforcement comes in, it's really a window of just a couple weeks. Whereas this kind of shows almost his whole career at Somerset, or at least it's supposed to portray a lengthy period. So by the time law enforcement already comes in, he's already killed all his victims. Here, it's like they're trying to catch this killer as it's going on. But it does have its accuracies. It does take its creative liberties. It does have some inaccuracies. But there are some creative inaccuracies, but I would say the things with the victims, how, and law enforcement coming in, and it's trying to show not just the movie through Amy's eyes, but also it's also not just a story about a serial killer nurse, but also a corrupt hospital system. Because of all the 10 hospitals that Cullen worked at, none of them were willing to fire him or take him to authorities for these suspicions out of fear that there would be lawsuits from the families, or being shut down by higher up, poison boards or something like that. So they all pretty much let him fly under the radar for 16 years at 10 different hospitals. So it shows the corrupt hospital system, and by showing these fictional victims, they're mainly just supposed to represent the kind of people that Cullen went after. Like the first victim, we see a character named Anna. She is fictional. She's not based on anyone in particular, but she is an elderly woman in critical care who is injected with a large amount of insulin and or digoxin, which were the 2 drugs that he used. So they're mainly representations of his victims instead of just completely fictional ones or ones based on real life ones. Although there was one victim that was 21 years old in the film, which he did have a 21-year-old victim that did go in for a surgery. Maybe this one is based on that one, but for the most part, I think the first one of Anna is just a representation of his sort of victim profile as a whole. But this also makes a good story. I mean, even if this was a complete work of fiction, it is a really compelling story where you have this very determined, dedicated nurse of Amy, played by Jessica Chastain, who I do like as an actress. But she has this heart condition. Can't remember what it was called, but it's in my notes. She has this heart condition where, her heart has a hard time pumping blood to the rest of her body, and stress would be very bad for her, inducing either a stroke or a heart attack. So she has this very stressful job. This friend that she has, Cullen, is helping her with the workload but then finds out he might be the serial killer within her hospital, and she is now helping law enforcement. So this extremely stressful environment with these stressful events with this heart condition. So even if this was fiction, it would be a very compelling story. But overall, I thought this film was very well made. It's well shot, uh, very well composed shots. It looks great. It has a really good, just eerie, ominous, dark score. It was directed by Tobias Lindholm, which he's also directed R, A Hijacking, and A Good Nurse. This is the only film of his that I've seen. Also, A War. Again, written by Christy Wilson Cairns, based on The Good Nurse, A True Story of Medicine, Madness, and Murder by Charles Graeber, which I have not read the book. In fact, the only thing I have on Charles Cullen, other than, actually, I don't even know if he's in these documentaries that I have, but other than like the big, damn it, other than like these big encyclopedias that I have, which has everyone, the only thing more Charles Cullen specific that I have is just this book on Angels of Death, nurse and doctor serial killers. That's Elizabeth Wettlaufer on the cover. And despite the title being given to a nurse or doctor serial killer, I think Cullen has become the one that is the most prolific and the one that sort of takes the crown of that title. I could be wrong about that, but I think Cullen has become the one that is mostly associated with the term Angel of Death. Which, this book, side note, it has Joseph Mengele in it. I don't think Joseph Mengele counts as a serial killer. He's a World War II, criminal. But, so, that's really it. He only has 5 pages, and that's a very brief book. I would like to get this book by Charles Graeber. Now, this was produced by Darren Aronofsky, which I thought was very interesting. It does kind of look and feel like an Aronofsky film. It definitely has sort of this aura or this vibe of an Aronofsky film. And it stars Jessica Chastain as Amy, of Eddie Redmayne as Charles Cullen. He does a great job. Now for him, he doesn't quite look like Cullen. He kind of has this similar, very slender, bony kind of figure and facial structure, but he is good at this very awkward performance. He's very awkward, but he's able to turn the charm on when he needs to, which Cullen was said to be like. But Cullen was said to be very calm and composed, even under stress. So, like, later on scenes when we do see Redmayne, like, explode under pressure, I think those were more for dramatic effect, where Cullen was said to be more composed. But Redmayne does give a very good performance. We also have Nnamdi Asamugia, if I pronounce that correctly, which I know I didn't. Kim Dickens and Noah Emmerich. Jodie Lee Lipes did the cinematography, and Biosphere did the score, which I know I've heard of them before. They're Norwegian electronic musicians, so I guess it's one person, not a band. But I really like the score. The score is very dark, ominous. Put out by Protozoa Pictures, released through Netflix. Apparently this was announced in 2016, but there was no developments up until February of 2020, and then Netflix entered negotiations for $25 million for worldwide distribution. So, wow. Um, it was filmed in Stamford, Connecticut, but it does have a New Jersey, Pennsylvania look to it. Now, I will say the performances across the board very good, especially Redmayne, Chastain. I do like the performance of the two detectives, which the two detectives have their real life names. Uh, Namamdi Asamugia, I apologize, plays Detective Danny Baldwin, and Noah Emmerich plays Detective Sergeant Tim Braun. Those were their real names. Those were the two detectives on the Cullen case. Uh, they're investigating the mysterious deaths at Parkfield because, again, all the hospitals have been changed. Um, and again, I'm guessing that's for legal reasons. Now, as I've said before, the writer did like the book, The Good Nurse, but thought that the most compelling aspect was that of Amy. Amy was able to bring in this emotional aspect, this life-like aspect, whereas it was, I think she described it as pretty much just dark, cold, emotionless death throughout the rest of the book, and Amy brought that life to it. So that's why she wrote it as, the whole movie being this window of just taking place at the last hospital. And I think that works. Again, I think a lot of people would want this to be a Charles Cullen biopic that does get into his history and his personal life, which is also very interesting. I mean, his father died at 7 months. Two of his siblings died when he was very young. He tried to commit suicide at least 20 times throughout his life before he became a nurse in '88. His first time being at 9 years old. He was just always just full of darkness, depression. He did join. He did join the Navy, but he didn't really like it. It was in the Navy. He decided he wanted to be a nurse. He was discharged from the Navy, and then he went and he got his degree, became a nurse in '87, and committed his first murder at '88. And there's all kinds of stories. Like, he got married, I think, in '88, divorced in '83, but had two daughters with his wife Adrienne. There were stories about how he just would become more and more unstable, even to the point of just walking down the street at night, mumbling to himself or talking to himself as he chased neighborhood pets around. Uh, every time something stressful would happen, like, when he got divorced, when he was told he couldn't see his daughters, when people, when his ex-wife got him in trouble for uh, abusing her two Yorkshire Terriers by putting one in a bowling bag. Those stressful events, he would go into work and then kill someone. So he does have a very interesting life before Somerset. And of course, I mean, a huge body count, which of course that's what most people want to see. I would say this film focuses more on the victims, because again, the victims are all fictional. They're more fictional representations of his, you know, a body count as a whole. But I would say it definitely doesn't glorify him as a killer. It doesn't. I wouldn't even say it portrays him in a sympathetic light. Some scenes kind of do, like towards the end, like how the scene where Amy wears a wire to try to get him to confess, or his first interrogation, and then when Amy comes in to get him to confess at the station. They are more emotional scenes than they were in real life. So I don't know if it's trying to portray him a little bit more sympathetic, but I mean, maybe the movie could have done a little bit better of a job at making him seem more off kilter or unstable, because maybe that's the point of the film, how no one saw it, because he does maybe a little bit awkward or shy, but he's completely normal otherwise in the film. Now, with a movie like Extremely Wicked, where your subject is Ted Bundy, you can kind of get away with that. I feel like this should have done a little bit more to show his instability or his darkness or something. But the film works. It's a beautifully made film, very well acted, uh, very well composed, shot wise, cinematography wise, score wise. I love the score, and it does do a good job at, if you're not going to show the murders, making the rest of it interesting or just as compelling. Which, you know, me being into this aspect of true crime as much as I am, like I've said, serial killers, mass murderers of all kinds, have been my biggest passion and interest for as long as I can remember, almost 20 years at this point. You can focus just on the investigation and not even show the killer until the very end. As long as it's accurate, I would still find it to be a very good movie. This, I thought it was very well made. I do understand why some things went a bit more fictional or in a more representative route. I get that. It does make it more tasteful, a bit more respectful, I guess. Um, would I like to see a movie about Charles Cullen, like his whole life? Sure. I think that'd be very interesting. But, I get for the sake of time, even though it's still over 2 hours, the most interesting part, the most compelling part, and it also gives it kind of a more ominous, sort of dark and enigmatic feel, not seeing the murders. Just kind of always seeing him there, or, he walks out of a room and he say like, well, I just checked on Kelly and she's doing fine, but then you find out that she's dying or is dead, and you find out about all this stuff at previous hospitals. It makes it more ominous. It creates more of a mystique. Maybe that's not the right word. It kind of makes it more enigmatic. It kind of makes it more threatening a little bit. Uh, so this movie really works. I know I'm a stickler for accuracy, but if there's a reason or a point as to why things might be fictional or more of like a representation, then I totally get it. If it works, and I think this film works. So I can definitely recommend it. I know the surface level people are going to have a hard time, like with Extremely Wicked or with the 2016 Night Stalker, where it doesn't really show anything, and the focus is more on this other character. It's told through her eyes. Um, which I will say this movie does do a better job with that, because there aren't any scenes with Cullen where Amy is not present. Whenever Cullen is present, so is Amy. So it's really kind of like seeing the film through her perspective, almost as if it's her account. So it does make a bit more sense, is a bit more well crafted in that respect than, say, something like Extremely Wicked or The Stranger Beside Me, how that's supposed to be Anne Rule's account of Ted Bundy. So this does a better job at that, but like the TV movies before Netflix, I am really liking these Netflix films too, because Extremely Wicked went to Netflix. So, whether it's something like Extremely Wicked, this, the Dahmer story. I haven't seen The Watcher yet. I still do need to see The Watcher. These Netflix films are proven to be just as good as the TV movies. So, uh, would I have liked to see a bit more accuracy, because it did kind of make it confusing at first, who they're talking about, or if the events are fictionalized versions or just completely made up. It's hard to tell at first what exactly was going on or what they were talking about. At first, anyway. So, would I like to a little bit more accuracy? Sure, but I get why they went the route they did. So definitely recommend it. Even aside from just being a good serial killer film or one about a real serial killer, I would say this was just a really good sort of psychological drama thriller uh, in general. So definitely go check it out if you haven't. But with that, we'll get into the cliff notes and then the film itself. So as always, I like to give like a brief cliff notes or a brief summary of the real life serial killer that the film is based on. So, New Jersey's most prolific serial killer, Charles Cullen, named the Angel of Death, though this moniker has been given to a number of, quote, killer nurses, he's now the most prolific, at least in America, who, in between 1988 and 2003, and across 10 hospitals, killed at least 29 patients, or that he was convicted of, though he confessed to up to 40, while law enforcement and hospitals in Pennsylvania and New Jersey believe his toll could be as high as 400, which, if true, would surpass Britain's most prolific serial killer, another angel of death, Harold Shipman, who killed 15 and possibly up to 250. Cullen would withdraw insulin and or digoxin from the medicine cabinets and inject it into IV bags of his patients. Most of his most of his victims were elderly, dying, or in critical care, which made the deaths not seem that out of the ordinary. Though he had risen suspicion with other nurses at most of his hospitals, none were willing to contact authorities in fear of lawsuits from the families. So he was often fired for acute reasons, such as wrongful dates on his applications, wrong previous work dates on his applications. At his last hospital, Somerset Medical Center in New Jersey, from 2002 until October 31st, 2003, he killed the most patients, at least 13, but also befriended a nurse, Amy Loughran, who he never made that many friends, but they grew close, and when suspicion arose with her, she helped the local detectives in their case against him, which they weren't contacted until after he killed his final victim. He was arrested on December 12th, 2003, and 2 days later he confessed. He avoided the death penalty by pleading guilty to 29 murders and is serving 18 consecutive life sentences. And so now we get to the film itself, and this is where I was starting to get confused, because it opens up at St. Aloysius Hospital in Pennsylvania in 1996. So I did just do a quick reference to see if that was a hospital he worked at, because I couldn't remember, and didn't see it anywhere. So that was when I started thinking, okay, maybe it's either going to be fictional, or maybe they just changed the names of the hospitals. That is what they did. Patient has a seizure, doctors rush in to aid, and Charles just backs up, leans against the wall, and stares coldly as the camera zooms right in on his face, with no emotional reaction. That's really the tone we get for the Cullen character, but then he's shown to be really either awkward or laughs and smiles up until the end, where we really see him get more sinister and unstable. He did work at 5 hospitals in Pennsylvania, but not St. Aloysius. But then we jump forward to Parkfield Memorial Hospital in New Jersey, 2003. This is the stand-in for Somerset Medical Center in Somerville, New Jersey, which he started working in 2002. We're introduced to nurse Amy Loughran. She's dedicated to her job and patients, and shown to have some heart condition. True, it was called cardiomyopathy, a disease that affects the heart muscle and its ability to pump blood to the rest of the body. She's ordered to stop working by her doctor, but she says she needs the health insurance, which won't kick in until 1 year of employment, so she has 4 months to go. Now, in the book, it said that she didn't want to lose her contract job. She was under contract. Also, I think it said something about a huge bonus, like a 20 grand bonus, or 2 grand, I can't remember. But also, her housing stipend. It, I guess the book didn't really mention anything about insurance, but insurance is obviously a big part of it. But uh, the movie, I think, makes more of a big deal about the insurance rather than other things. I could be wrong. That's just what I've read. um, but also, she did have a pacemaker at that time. The movie doesn't mention the pacemaker, which will come into play later towards the end. Shows Amy and Charles meeting for the first time. He's the new guy. He began working September 2002. Charlie and Amy become friends, and they say they have two girls. His are 4 and 7. Hers are 5 and 9. His Charles Cullen's oldest daughter Shauna would have been 16 by this time, and his youngest Saskia would have been at least 9 by 2003. Her eldest Alex was 11 at this time, whereas she said 9 in the film. Also, at one point we see her having an attack. She can't breathe. So Charles tells her, you rest. I'll take on most of the workload. They work the night shift. Which, that is one thing about these Angels of Death. Not only do they not stay at one hospital or care facility for very long, but they also like the night shifts and the more critical or more elderly wing. So, and Cullen was no exception. But he also, helps give her rides, helps take care of her daughters. He's not allowed to see his, which I think he had supervised visitations at one point, which, I mean, by 2003, they were already divorced for 10 years. So, it doesn't really say in the film how long they've been divorced, but it shows him at her house at one point cooking for them, helping her out with her daughters, playing with them, which it was never said that he met her daughters or helped cook at her house, but he did help with the workload at work. He did help her with the commute, give her rides. We see an elderly patient, Anna, dying. Now, I put the first victim at Somerset was Eleanor Stoker, 60-year-old who died February 12th, 2003. I thought maybe she's based on her, but then, I was doing some reading on the film and said she's not based on anyone specific, just more of a representation of the kind of patients that Cullen would kill. Then we jump 7 weeks later. Detectives Braun and Baldwin are discussing the suspicious death of Anna Martinez, admitted for a reaction to amoxicillin, says she was 77. No one knows the cause of death. But again, they're brought in by, I think, the health board because they make it sound like it's a suspicious death. And this is where I was starting to get confused because if you look up things about Charles Cullen, almost every website is something different. But what I've always known was, so those are their real names, as I said, was Charles Cullen had already killed all his victims. Now, his victim in August is when they realize, okay, we've had 4 mysterious deaths, or that they knew of. So that was when they realized, okay, they have something wrong. They do like an internal investigation, don't come up with anything. They sit on it for 7 weeks, 2 months, and then in October, that's when they called the detectives. So that's what I got out of the real life scenario. Whereas here, they make it sound like that was the first one. Then they call them. But you still get the idea that everyone's withholding information, especially the director or whatever she is. They make her have a bad poker face so that she doesn't know what's going on and that she won't talk about certain things. That's true. You can definitely tell this hospital is trying to protect its ass from lawsuits. We see the detectives calling previous hospitals. Uh, Once they lock in on Cullen, they try to call previous hospitals. They won't talk to them. That's true. Uh, so I put this is how a number of hospitals handled Cullen's victims. Police got involved after the death of Edward P. Zizek, 73, October 21st of '03. That was his final victim. Suspicions arose after August 11th, 2003. Christopher B. Hardgrove, 38. They suspected 4. They put it off till October, which he killed 5 more in that period. Charles seen helping Amy at home, getting close with her daughters. Again, it was never said he met them or cooked for them, just gave her rides. Detectives look into the staff and see Cullen got a trespassing charge 8 years prior in Palmer, Pennsylvania. Now, in March of '93, he did stalk a fellow nurse and he broke into her house and he pled guilty to a misdemeanor trespassing charge. Whereas in the film, it says he got harassment and trespassing for slashing the tires of an ex-girlfriend, and it was in 1995, not '93. I don't know if it's based on that account or just sort of a representation of his troubled past. Amy interviewed by detectives. Report shows that Anna got a shot of insulin despite not having diabetes. Cullen did use insulin, one of his more favored MO drugs, along with digoxin. This is also when they show her, I think it was the report of her drugs, like what was found in her system. So that's when she realizes that was weird. Patient Jack Evans, they say July 19th, '88, so that's his birthday, goes into some cardiac arrest or something after recovering from gallbladder surgery, where he initially had no complications. Then he dies. He could be based on Michael T. Strenko, who was 21. He was the youngest victim. It was around this time. Obviously, it was in Somerset. And he did go in to have his spleen removed, so it was a simple surgery, no complications, and then this just happened. So, could be based on him. Or it could just represent that he targeted some victims that were not terminally ill, because he would say he wanted to end their suffering. But I think he even had one victim that had like a sprained ankle or something, and he ended up overdosing her, so she wasn't terminally ill. Cullen shares with Amy how his wife is holding his daughters from him and saying he's been mean to her dog. He did have supervised visitations, I think, at first, and then he wasn't allowed to. And he was mean to her 2 Yorkies, even putting one in a bowling bag. Insulin and digoxin found in Anna's system report. I put that twice for some reason. One detective tries to go get the drug withdrawal report. Because every time you go to the medicine cabinet, you have to do a thing, so it will open and it says what drugs were taken. But he notices there's like a pages missing for that report, and he wants that window. But that's when she plays stupid, and he gets really mad, realizes they're holding stuff, which is true. Insulin found in another current patient's system. She died. And I have read that every time something stressful happened, Cullen would kill, such as visitations, not seeing his kids, being accused of hurting the dogs. So, like, he mentions that, and then this woman ends up being killed. Like, during seemingly the same shift. So, partially true. Detectives approach Amy about Cullen after the recent victim. She says She knows he was in there, but has his doubts. Because like we show him coming out and said, "Well, Kelly's doing fine. I'm gonna go check on," and then her uh, heart rate monitor starts going off. Amy meets with an old friend that worked with Charlie at another hospital. She tells Amy he was suspected of ODing a patient, and that she saw him uh, like pin pricking IV bags and injecting stuff. Uh, in real life, which, yes, that did happen. She did meet up with a friend, I think, who told her that. But the film shows that she races from the diner to the hospital and finds IV bags with pinpricks. I don't think that happened. I don't think that's how Amy found out. In real life, police showed her drug withdrawal reports and saw an astronomical amount and frequency, and just a bunch of inconsistencies and uh, just a whole lot of errors, and that's what really sparked her belief that he could be guilty. But she could also just represent past nurses, because nurses at almost every hospital he worked at were coming forward, including 7 nurses at St. Luke's in Pennsylvania suspected or saw him injecting drugs into bags. But when they tried to alert hospitals, they did investigation, but there was a lack of evidence, so it was dropped. There was another hospital where a handful of nurses, almost every nurse, said that they would quit together if Cullen wasn't fired, so he was. Amy meets with detectives and becomes involved. They have the previous woman's body exhumed for an autopsy. Now, this didn't happen during the investigation, but the body of 91-year-old Helen Dean, who was killed back in 91, was exhumed in 2004 after his arrest. And of course, it showed that she had insulin in her system. In real life, she noticed a bunch of errors in his withdrawal reports, observations, and computer records of him looking into other patients, which she thought was very suspicious, including the amount and frequency of the withdrawn drugs. And she also knew that he knew how to get drugs out of the cabinet, just by hitting like cancel. Like if you cancel whatever process, it'll still open. So it just looks like you canceled an order or canceled a transaction. So that's when she really knows, okay, he's guilty. Cullen fired for writing wrong dates on his job application for previous work dates. It's their way of firing him for the suspicions without it actually being known true. He was fired on Halloween of 2003, 10 days after his last victim. Amy makes a tapped phone call to Cullen with the detectives there to set up a lunch date to talk. I think that happened, or maybe they just set it up regularly and then they gave her the wire. So they meet up at a diner. She wears a wire, which is true. In real life, she had a pacemaker, which would have interfered with the wire. The detectives actually told her when they saw the scar that she didn't have to go through with it, but she was determined to catch him. She wanted to take down, this former friend that was killing patients. So she went through with it. However, she did not get a confession. Yes, it was at a diner. Well, he walks in and says he's starting a new job at this other hospital in Pennsylvania. He was not hired at another hospital in between Somerset and his arrest, which was almost 2 months later. He didn't confess to her or really say anything that incriminating, but he did say enough to allow him to be brought in for questioning. Now, here he kind of has a blow up. He hits the table and gets really mad. According to the real life Amy, she said he was very calm and composed the whole time, and then he just left. So that he's picked up. He was arrested on the 12th, and so then it shows them in the interrogation room. One of the detectives on the recorder says it's the 13th, so maybe he's been there for a day already. And here we have another day, another scene where he just yells. Cullen was known to repeat phrases when he got really angry. So this scene is partially true, though I've also read that the interrogation was actually kind of easy. He wasn't this difficult. But he was known to just yell and repeat phrases if he was upset. Even at trial, you can find pictures online. He yelled, "You're out of I think you're out of order, Your Honor. You need to step down." Until he had like a gag put on him with like a mask, in which he still kept trying to say it. So in the film, he just keeps yelling, "I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't." But I guess he wasn't that difficult in real life. But then Amy's brought down, she sits with him, and then he confesses to her. And he confessed on December 14th. So then we get the end text, which says, "To avoid the death sentence, Charles Cullen pled guilty to the murder of 29 people. The real number of his victims is believed to be up to 400. True. And he did confess up to 40, but he was convicted of 29. Says he never explained why he did it. True, even though I think the closest he had said was, I wanted to help them. Because I think he tried to justify it by saying, they're suffering, I'm ending their suffering. Then it says he is currently serving 18 consecutive life sentences in New Jersey State Prison and will not be eligible for parole until 2403. True. He was originally given 11 consecutive sentences, but then I think in that hearing he was given an additional 6 more, which that would be 17. So then it says, I also read that he would, help law enforcement identify other patients. So maybe that's where the 18th came in. But in any case, Cullen was a nurse for 16 years. Most of the hospitals he worked at harbored suspicions about him. None stopped him. True. He worked at 10, and if he was ever caught tampering with medicine or suspicious activity, he was fired, and it was covered up at the risk of a lawsuit. Then it says, there have never been any criminal proceedings against any of the hospitals. Kind of true. Some families have come out with lawsuits, but every lawsuit has been settled out of court and sealed. Then it says, we get a scene of Amy with her daughters, and then it says, Amy got the heart surgery she needed and lives in Florida with her daughters and grandchildren. She is still a good nurse. True, she did later on get the heart surgery. I don't remember what year. I think it was 2008. I want to say it was 2008. She is still a nurse, only now she does more spiritual healing rather than scientific medicine. I was surprised it didn't make any mention of the Cullen Law. New Jersey started this new law where hospitals had to have more strict background checks and more strict accuracy on applications about previous work history dates, any sort of complaints or infractions. And then 35 states followed suit after them. And I think they were calling it the Cullen Law. And I think some states like New Jersey, those complaints or infractions or disciplinary actions stay on there for 7 years. So, because these hospitals didn't really do anything to him or prevent him from getting a job at another hospital, he was able to continue working at hospitals and kill more people. So now they have these stricter laws, and it started in New Jersey because of him. And that's The Good Nurse. So that's the first film I've reviewed about a killer doctor or nurse. I did see that there's a Harold Shipman film on YouTube, so I'll probably check that out. Again, I thought this was very well made. I mean, yeah, it doesn't feel like a theatrical film. It does feel like a Netflix film. It does feel like something straight to Netflix. But it does have this sort of slow burn, kind of bleak feeling and looking sort of Darren Aronofsky film. It did remind me. I can't remember which film I reviewed recently where I said it kind of has a David Fincher feel. This one has more of an Aronofsky feel. And yeah, he did produce it. But all the performances are good. I really like the way it's shot, the way it's filmed, the way it looks is very well done. The score is excellent, very dark and ominous. It really fits perfectly. Uh, it didn't bother me at all that we don't see Cullen actually killing. It's more of this unseen thing in the background. Because where it is told through Amy's eyes, she can't see it. So it makes sense that we go through the film with her and we figure everything out as she does. So narratively, it makes sense. I know the surface level people will just essentially want a killer doctor via overdose slasher type film. Or maybe they won't watch it because where he does overdose with them, it won't be a slasher film. Could I have asked for more accuracy? Sure. But like I said earlier, I do get why they either changed the name of some things or went with a more representative route. It's not like they just made shit up or got shit wrong. They had a reason for doing it, and I get that. It still works. So, very well made film. I really enjoyed it. It does remind me a lot about Extremely Wicked, just in the way it portrays the killer, show it through the eyes of someone else based on a book. I will say this does a better job at telling the story through someone else's perspective, but it's still a very good film. I was impressed with it. I had a feeling it was going to be good. These Netflix serial killer films, just like their documentaries, all seem to be very, very good. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it, again, even though you just sat through the whole review, definitely go check it out. Not sure which one I'll be reviewing next. It's kind of up in the air, but in any case, stay tuned for what's next, and thank you for watching.